Hello, I'm Dr. Robert Bostic, Superintendent of Schools for Stafford Municipal School District, and I'm here with some news that you can use along with your family to keep you in the know. We're excited to bring you today's virtual lesson, The Chemistry Behind Baking. This lecture will feature two of our chefs and our AP Chemistry instructor. The instructors will present a baking/chemistry lesson from La Sparta Cafe, located in Stafford's own College and Career Center. The Culinary Arts program is one of 12 college and career programs of study offered by SMSD. It's also one of 6 dual credit programs where students can earn college credit while they're still in high school through our partnership with Houston Community College. For more information about our college and career programs, please visit our website at www.staffordmsd.org.
I miss the energy level that my students brought to class each and every day. It made me want to be a better teacher.
I miss our daily lessons on literature and life, and how we simultaneously use those lessons to propel ourselves to be better beings so that we can help those in need. I miss students who have contributed to a classroom that's full of compassion, care, concern, and love. I miss the laughs, I miss the jokes, but more than anything, I miss the, "Hey, Miss A-Bear, have a good day, Miss A-Bear." Yeah, I miss that.
Hi, welcome to La Sparta Cafe. I'm Joe Mullaney. I'm a chemistry teacher here at Stafford High School, and I'm joined today by 2 members of our excellent culinary arts department, Chef Martino and Chef Goodhue. And what we're going to do today is to explain to you not only the principles of chemistry, but how those principles are used each day by chefs as they create dishes that we enjoy.
Did you know that you use chemistry every time you bake cookies? Mr. Mullaney is going to explain to us the chemical processes of baking and exactly what happens when you put cookies in an oven that's been preheated to 350 degrees.
Before we can talk about the effects of gases in cooking, we need to understand how gases behave normally, and then we can apply those behaviors to the cooking process to understand their effects. Now, I have here a balloon which we'll use as a model to explain. So, if you blow on your hand, you can feel the force of the blowing your air on your hand. And when I was a kid, I used to think that it was that force that caused the balloon to expand and take the shape that it does. But if that were the case, then a balloon would be like a flag, because when the wind is blowing, the flag is standing upright and flapping in the wind, but then when the wind isn't blowing, it hangs down by the mast. And yet, this balloon is still maintaining its shape even though I'm not currently blowing into it. So it must be something different that is causing the balloon to hold this shape. What is that? It's gas pressure. Gas pressure is caused by the particles of gases hitting the inside walls of the container. And in the case of the balloon, it wasn't the fact that I was blowing into the balloon that caused the balloon to expand, but rather the fact that I was introducing molds of gas particles into the container, and those gas particles immediately started bouncing around, and every time they hit the container, they started pushing it outwards. And just when you consider that 14 drops of water have more molecules than all the stars in the universe, then you can see that 2 or 3 puffs of air is going to have a heck of a lot of molecules bouncing around and pushing and pushing and pushing on the balloon, causing it to expand. But that's not all. This is the gas pressure inside the balloon. But at the same time, you have air pressure, which is the pressure from all the gas particles, air particles outside of the balloon, hitting the balloon, trying to get it to go smaller. So at some point, you reach where the gas pressure pushing outwards equals the air pressure pushing inwards, and so the balloon establishes its size. Now, All of this can be explained by using the ideal gas formula, which is based on the kinetic molecular theory of gases, which we've covered in a previous class. But the ideal gas formula boils down to the variables PV equals nRT, or pressure of the interior gas particles times the volume of the container is equal to the number of moles of gases times the ideal gas constant R times the temperature in Kelvin. So now we're going to head back to the kitchen as the chefs are going to begin baking the cookies.
The most important thing to do when you start cooking any recipe is to gather together all of your equipment and ingredients. This is called mise en place, which is French for to put in place. So, to make our cookies today, we need a stand mixer that's fitted with a paddle attachment, mixing bowls, one for wet ingredients, one for dry ingredients, and also some other ones to weigh out or measure our different ingredients. We will need rubber spatulas, dry measuring cups, measuring spoons, a scale, a scoop for scooping the cookies, and finally a spatula to remove the cookies from the cookie sheet once they're done. As you can see, we're in a commercial kitchen, so we've got some equipment that you may not have at home. For instance, you may not have a stand mixer. When I was younger, when I was growing up, whenever we wanted to make cookies, we used a mixing bowl and a wooden spoon to cream our softened butter and sugars together. Took a little bit longer, but we didn't have to worry about arm day at the gym either. The other thing that you may not have at home is parchment paper. Parchment paper is a special paper that is treated so that things won't stick. We use it to line our baking sheets. If you don't have parchment paper, that's all right. You can scoop the cookies directly onto the baking sheet. They shouldn't stick because of the amount of butter. The parchment paper really just makes cleanup a lot easier.
Today we'll be making 2 batches of cookies. We'll be making 1 batch without baking soda, 1 batch with baking soda. Baking soda is a leavening agent, so it's important to see the 2 different batches. Since we're working with science in the kitchen, we want to be able to see the difference in between the 2 different recipes.
The key ingredient or key chemical that's involved in today's reaction or today's recipe is baking soda. Baking soda has the chemical formula of NaHCO3, which is why sometimes it's called bicarbonate of soda. CO3 is the carbonate polyatomic ion. And at 176 degrees Fahrenheit, baking soda decomposes. And if you remember, a decomposition reaction is one where one reactant breaks up into multiple smaller particles or constituent molecules. And so here we can see that the solid baking soda, as soon as you reach 176 degrees, will break up into solid sodium carbonate. This will stay in the cookie and will add to its flavor. But it also creates water, H2O, and carbon dioxide. Since the cookies are being baked at 350 degrees, water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, so the water that is created will be a gas, and carbon dioxide boils at negative 109 degrees Fahrenheit, which is why it's a gas at room temperature, so it will be a gas as well. So what is going to happen is, as we bake the cookies, is that gases will be created inside of each cookie, and just as what we saw with the balloon, those gases are going to push against the cookies, which, because they're not yet fully baked, are elastic and are able to expand just as the balloon did, and they will in fact cause the cookies to rise as they bake. And then as the cookies harden, they become less elastic and the gases escape, causing them to no longer rise.
The ingredients we need today are divided into wet and dry ingredients. It's important for accuracy that we measure correctly, especially for the dry ingredients. We're going to start by showing you what the difference is when we measure with measuring cups versus using a scale. Take your measuring cup, make sure that you don't shake them, just level them off. Make sure you get a nice, clean, even surface. You'll take these, and that way you get 4 even cups here. We're doing 4 cups if you're measuring this way. You can see our recipes, okay? Do 4 cups. Remember, no shaking. You see I'm not shaking them. That would be packing the flour, and you're going to get a completely different amount of flour every time if you do it that way. And it will change the recipe every time. Now this way I'm going to show you if you weigh it from the scale. First thing you want to do is turn on your scale. You put your measuring device, your weighing device on first, and then we're going to zero out our scale. We'll just put this on here and allow it to zero out. Now the most accurate way is to do it in grams. Okay? So for this particular recipe, we would need 600 grams. Looks just slightly different there. Next, we need to do our salt. I've pulled a little bit out here. We're going to need 2 teaspoons of salt. For this, okay, and we need a teaspoon of the baking soda. Same thing goes here. You want to make sure that you're getting a level amount, so I always use the same device. Level that off. Okay. And we can go ahead and weigh out our chocolate chips. And since I'm going to use the more accurate measurement here, okay, I'm going to weigh those chocolate chips out. That's 2 pounds of chocolate chips. Perfect. Now we have our dry ingredients prepared right here.
So our wet ingredients today include 8 ounces, or 1 cup plus 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar, 12 ounces of brown sugar, which equates to 2 1/4 cups, a pound of butter, 3 large eggs, and 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. What we will do is we will start with the creaming method. Most cookies are made using this method, and what that means is that we will take softened butter, which has been sitting out at room temperature for about an hour, add it to the mixer and turn the mixer on medium speed to soften the butter up just a little bit. To that we will add both sugars and beat it on medium speed for about 5 minutes. That's going to add some air, and it's going to distribute the sugar and give us a smooth mix without any lumps. That gives even distribution for the cookies of the ingredients, and it will make for a nice spread. If we overbeat or overcream the butter, the cookies will spread too much and they'll be very thin and they'll be crispy and risk burning. If we don't cream them enough, they won't spread properly and we won't have that nice crust that we like with our cookies when you crunch into it. So we will add that, cream it together. Once it's fully creamed, we're going to add our eggs one at a time. The eggs are added to the mixer one at a time and beaten until they're fully incorporated. Again, this adds for a homogeneous mixture where everything is evenly distributed. We like to first crack the eggs into a small bowl, one at a time. That way we can avoid contaminating the mixture with any shells. So we will do all 3 of these into a liquid measuring cup, and then I can just add them once the butter mixture is creamed. So there are my 3 eggs. Clean as I go. It's much easier to clean a little bit at a time. The last ingredient that we need to add for the wet ingredients is 2 teaspoons of vanilla. You can put the vanilla directly in with your eggs and add it at the same time, or you can add it later. This, however, avoids getting another dish dirty, and nobody likes to do dishes, so we are going to put this right in here. Okay, 2 teaspoons. So we're ready to start mixing. We will put the butter directly into the bowl of the mixer. And now we'll add our sugars. We can add them all at once. Start on low. And then gradually increase the speed. So our butter is creamed. You can see that it's light and fluffy. The color is actually a little bit lighter too from the incorporation of the air. And everything is homogeneous. Every scrap of it looks exactly the same as the next. So with the mixer running, we're going to add our eggs one at a time. Eggs are kind of fun. They'll separate themselves when you pour them in. Just like that. We want to mix this on a medium speed until the eggs are fully incorporated before we add the next one. This will avoid lumps in our batter. It will avoid clumps of any specific ingredient or taste. So now it's time to add our dry ingredients. We have our flour that's been measured and sifted, our salt, and our baking soda. We want to make sure that we stir the baking soda and salt into the flour. You can also sift it all together. This makes sure that we have an even distribution of salt and baking soda because nobody wants to bite into a big piece of salt in their chocolate chip cookie. The other dry ingredients that we have are our chocolate chips. So we'll now add these to the mixer on low speed so that we don't get dusted in flour by turning the speed up too high. The last thing we need to do is add our chocolate chips. We're going to add them to the bowl and mix on low. And we want to mix till they're just barely combined and we have a homogeneous mixture. Put these in. Raise this bowl. And this is only going to take a minute. We want to take care not to overmix our dough because when you combine flour with moisture, it creates a protein called gluten. And the more that we mix it, the stronger the gluten becomes. So when we knead bread, we get a really tough product with a crusty crust that's very crunchy. We don't want that in our cookies. We want them to be soft and pleasant to bite into, so we want a quick, short mix just to incorporate.
Now that we've made both cookie doughs, we need to go ahead and get them ready for the sheet trays so that we can bake them. As you can see by looking at the cookie doughs, it's almost impossible to see a difference between the two cookies. We won't be able to tell a difference until we've actually baked them and gotten them out of the oven. So the first thing we need to do is put them onto the cookie trays. First thing we want to do is make sure that we line them with parchment paper. Again, if you don't have parchment paper at home, you can just put it straight onto the cookie sheet without the parchment paper. There's enough butter in these cookies that shouldn't stick at home. You take the cookie, use an appropriate size cookie scoop, and place them onto here. These cookies, this cookie scoop is so large, we're only going to put 6 cookies onto each sheet tray and space them evenly. They will spread slightly. Once you get the cookies onto the sheet tray, you're going to want to put them into the cooler to give them time to chill. Give it at least 30 minutes. This gives it time for the butter to chill and harden back inside of the cookie so that it doesn't melt out and it gives that nice crust inside of the cookie.
Now that the cookies have chilled for 30 minutes, we're going to take them and put them in the oven. We'll bake them at 350 degrees for anywhere from 12 to 15 minutes, depends on your oven. So now it's time to put our cookies into the oven. In 11 or 12 minutes, we should have some cookies that are ready to taste.
As you can see, we've taken the cookies out of the oven. We have 2 separate trays. Over here we have the cookies with no baking soda in them, and the cookies over here have the baking soda in them. Visually, they look slightly different. Mr. Mullaney.
Yes, if you recall, when we talked about baking soda decomposing at 176 degrees, it would create gases. And those gases inside each cookie would expand and push out on the cookie dough, causing it to rise. And we can see that without the baking soda, there was no gas to cause it to rise, where there was indeed when we used baking soda, and that's why that one is larger.
Would you like to try the cookies, Mr. Mullaney?
I sure would. I don't normally get to eat my own experiments, so this will be nice. I can tell you guys, these people are excellent chemists.
Thank you, Mr. Mullaney.
Thank you. Now, I will say that in science, scientists are a bit skeptical whenever a new discovery is made. And they always watch to see if that experiment can be replicated in a different laboratory before they fully believe it. So what you should do is try making this recipe at home for yourself and see if they're equally delicious. Do it for science.
Thank you for joining us, Mr. Mullaney. And thank you, guests at home, for joining us in La Sparta Cafe. We hope that you can enjoy our cookies at home and continue baking. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Raquel Efferson. I am a 4th grade ELAR and Social Studies teacher here at Stafford Elementary School. The Texas standard that we're going to use for today's lesson is 4.6G. To sum up that TEK, it's pretty much using our thinking skills to better process the details that we read or see to better understand. The purpose of this lesson is to make sure that we're not just reading, but we have a deeper understanding of what we're reading or seeing on TV or in movies. So to better process the details that we see in stories, we can actually use story maps. So this story map that I have up here features the title, characters, setting, parts of the story, and then something that you learn from that story. So to the end of the video, I'm going to actually share with you guys other story maps that you can use for complex text or different levels of text. Okay, for today's lesson, we're going to use Up in the Air by Daniel Scheffler. The TEK that we use, 4.6G, it mentions that you have to use your metacognitive skills, which are pretty much thinking about thinking. So what I like to do with my students is I tell them either have sticky notes or you can have a pen, and you have to actually mark up your stories whenever you read them. Sticky notes are for if you don't really want to mess up your books, but the best way is to just mark it up, get it as messy as you can. So what we're going to note while we're reading is characters, parts of the setting, important part of the story, and maybe something that you learn as we're going along. So while I'm reading, I'm going to underline the characters once, and I'm going to underline parts of the setting twice. And any important details that I see about maybe important parts of the story, I might circle those just so I can go back to them later and put them on my chart. Kurt, I'm going to underline that because that's the character's name, closed the door of his mother's car with great excitement. His mother can also be a character even though they don't mention her name. Today was the day he was finally going to be on a plane. For the first time in his life, he was going to actually soar through the skies and see the clouds from all the angles he had imagined since he was little. Are you excited, my boy? Said Kirk's mother. Val from the front of the car. So Val, we got her name now. So now we can go ahead and underline that. I can't believe today's the day, said Kurt. I believe it, responded Kirk's older brother, Joshim. So we can underline that, as he lifted his head from his mobile phone for just a second to speak to Kurt. The car ride felt like forever, but that's because Kurt could not wait to get to the airport and see this adventure through. It felt like they were stuck in traffic for hours and all the cars were moving slowly just to drive Kurt crazy. But actually, they arrived at the airport in just a few minutes. So maybe right there is where I can circle and I can say, okay, so the beginning of the story, Kurt's in the car. He's very excited to go to the airport, so he's a little bit anxious about that. Let's go ahead and continue reading. Val parked this car in the underground parking lot and found a steel trolley to load the suitcases and the hat box she always took with her on a journey. Joshim never helped with anything, so Kurt knew he was the best man for the job. He helped his mother load the trolley neatly and pushed it toward the terminal building proudly. It was bigger than Kurt thought it would be. Sorry, guys. It was a massive building filled with hundreds of people looking around and rushing to get wherever they were going. He immediately felt the rush of energy as he walked towards the check-in desk. He watched as Val took out their passports and gave them to the friendly lady on the other side of the desk. His mother asked Joshim to help lift the bags onto the scale so that they could weigh and check in, but he wasn't listening. Kurt gloated as he lifted the bags and put them on the designated scale. The check-in lady was overly friendly and appreciative of his help. He loved the feeling. Val was handed some tickets and off they went to security. After what felt like a long wait in line, the security officer asked Kurt to empty his pockets and put his bag through the big X-ray scanner. Kurt had never done this before, and he felt a little nervous. It was such a big and scary machine that he started beeping loudly as the elderly woman in front of him walked through. Kurt started to feel more confident now as he walked through the machine. Not a beep. He waited for his family to come through the security as he grabbed his bag. Suddenly, he saw the plane through the massive glass window. It was huge, and it looked much bigger than what it looked like in his dreams. So we can pause right there and we can say, okay, maybe part of the middle story is his adventure having to get through the airport and go through all the terminals and the different stations that you might have to get to in the airport. So this, we can say maybe he helped a woman that worked there, or we can say that his brother is not that very much helpful. But again, we are able to see some of the important details that are in the middle of the story. So far I want to say we have two settings. One we can say was in the car. The next one now he's at the airport. So let's continue to read to see if we can have any more characters or a setting or any more things, important details that we can add to the end of our chart. Kurt ran down the ramp towards the gate. After a few minutes, the plane was ready for boarding. Everyone lined up and showed their tickets. Walking on the ramp down towards the plane, Kurt nearly tripped from the excitement, and then he arrived. He was 1 foot away from the plane, and finally, feeling like a grown-up, he would fly all over the globe. The air steward took his ticket and showed him down the aisle to his seat. Kurt ran away to his mother and brother and immediately sat down in his seat. Buckling his seatbelt with his eyes firmly on the wing of the plane, he was waiting for everyone to sit down so that he can feel the weightlessness that everyone talks about at school when a plane takes off. The plane started to move and reversed slightly, moving like a giant metal bird. The plane taxied toward the runway. Kurt clenched his mother's hand. The plane started to speed up faster, and Kurt has ever gone in his life in any car or boat. And then, as if by magic, the plane lifted off the ground, and Kurt knew this would be the first of many adventures that started this way. So, as we can read, we have gotten our characters, our setting, parts of the story, and maybe some of you have different ways of different things that you've learned at the end of the story. So the really cool thing about reading is that we're not the same readers. So just because someone read the same story as you doesn't mean that you're going to learn the same things from them. So now we can actually go ahead and take this information that we have from our story and we can fill out our chart. Okay, so this part of the lesson, we're going to actually use the story that we just read, Up in the Air, and we're going to fill out our story map to process the details that we just finished reading. The title, of course, was Up in the Air by Daniel Scheffler. Now the characters that we underlined while we were reading, Kurt, which is our main character, his mom, which they later told us her name was Val, and I'm going to put in parentheses that's his mom, and his older brother, Joel Sheen. Now just added on there, we did have a few other characters that we don't necessarily have to write because they're kind of just like partly in there, which is the stewardess, and maybe the woman who he helped that worked at the airport, just a few other characters that we don't necessarily have to put in there, but you do have the option of doing that. So we also underlined the settings of the story. So we had, he was in the car when he was impatient, then he actually got to the airport, and of course, finally, where he always wanted to be at, we are on the plane. So far we have the title, we have our characters, and our setting. So this is the part of the story map that is up to your discretion. So it can be any part that you found the most important or the most insightful about the stories that you just read. So the beginning, like I mentioned before when I had to stop reading, in the beginning he's in the car, he's very anxious. So I'm just going to shorthand it. So we can say Kurt anxiously waited to get to the airport, or waited to arrive at the airport. Now close to the middle, of course, they finally arrived and he had to get through all of the terminals. So a way that we can word it is, Kurt and his family finally arrived. And then we can just add, they went through different checkpoints. And of course, at the end is what Kurt always wanted. So Kurt finally rode on an airplane. And then, like I said before, these parts of the story can be at your discretion. So if you say that you want to add more details, that's definitely up to you guys, and that is okay to, of course, be your own reader and think for yourselves. So something that we have learned, this one right here, we can have different ideas about what we've learned. Because maybe, like me, when I was reading, I saw that Kurt helped the woman in the airport when she dropped her stuff and his brother didn't. So that's something that I took from that one as a lesson to always help others that are in need. So I can write that one down. But if you, while we're reading, you saw something else that kind of said, like, you know what, I think I learned this lesson, then you can also do that as well. So mine is always help others in need. Or Kurt was very anxious to get on that plane, so we can say Patience is sometimes our best friend or something on those lines, because again, he was impatient in the car, he was ready to go, he was anxious, and then he finally got there. So even though he was rushing himself, and even though he was a little bit impatient, he finally got there. So we can even have a lesson or something about patience. So now that we've learned how to actually fill out a story map, I want to mention that you can also use story maps to create your own stories, which is the really cool thing. So like these two that we have with the Three Little Pigs and Up in the Air by Daniel Scheffler, you can have a blank story map and you can actually create your own characters. You can set up your settings. You can have just very small details about what's going to happen in the beginning, the middle, and the end of the story. And then you can finally say, okay, what is the lesson that I want my readers to learn from the stories? For more resources on free books and publishing sites, feel free to visit the following links.
Hello, my name is Miss Adkins. I am a U.S. history teacher at Stafford Middle School. So today we are going to explore TEK 8.23e, identify the role of women in the Civil War. So first off, we have to learn about what was the Civil War. Throughout the 1800s, the biggest issue that was going on in the United States was slavery. Where was it located? Where was it not located? And should it be allowed in these new states that are being added? States like Texas. So in 1861, South Carolina decided to secede or separate from the United States. Because of this, 10 other states followed and created what is known as the Confederacy. The Confederacy was a large country that declared itself independent of the United States. So the Civil War lasted from 1861 to 1864. Hundreds of thousands of Americans died during this time period, and it was one of the worst conflicts in US history. So women in the 1800s didn't have a whole lot that they could do. They could be teachers if they weren't married. They could work in factories that had just been built. But many of the highest paying jobs were limited to men. For example, doctors. Women dealt with this in several different ways. Now, many of them were trailblazers. Do you know what a trailblazer is? A trailblazer is someone who works very, very hard to break down limits. So the first woman we're going to talk about is Clara Barton. So how many of you at home have ever heard of the American Red Cross? You might have run into them in several different ways. They work with families after disasters, for example, Hurricane Harvey. What you may not know is the American Red Cross was actually founded by a woman, and the first president of the organization was a woman named Clara Barton. Now, Clara Barton was born early in the 1800s. She was the youngest of 5 by nearly a decade, and she was considered the baby of her family. Now, while she was growing up, she learned a lot of things from her family members. For example, how to sew. Now, you might not think of sewing as something that is particularly interesting or necessary, but during that time when you had to make your own clothing, it was the #1 job of a woman in a household. Now, this skill in particular would go on to serve her later when she served as a nurse during the Civil War. So, Clara Barton as a young woman was a teacher. At the age of 24, she opened up her own school for workers at her brother's mill. She also moved to New Jersey and created a school for boys who weren't able to get an education earlier in their life. Now, like I said earlier, women weren't allowed to have many jobs during this time period, and when Clara Barton was hired by the US Patent Office in 1854, she was the first woman to be able to do that. Now, a few years later, her position was eliminated because the person in charge of that organization, the Secretary of the Interior, did not believe that women were able to do the same work as men. In 1860, she was rehired to this position by President Abraham Lincoln. Now, in 1861, when the war broke out at Fort Sumter, Clara Barton knew that one of the biggest things that any military needs to run is supplies. So knowing this, she went to her friends and her neighbors and everybody in her community and organized supplies for these soldiers. She then had to fight the military in order to transport these supplies to the front lines. Now, this was the last time Clara Barton asked permission, and in fact would continue to do these supply runs throughout the rest of the war. Clara Barton became known as the Angel of the Battlefield. Now we need to take a second to understand a little bit about the Civil War. The Civil War was brutal. So at the time, there weren't a lot of the same technology that we have now. There weren't a lot of the same practices that hospitals use now. For example, something as simple as an ambulance. When you get hurt, you can call an ambulance to come and take you to the hospital. But when you're on a battlefield that spans miles and miles and miles, you often can't expect to be helped like that. Now, during the Civil War, this was the first time that ambulances first started to be used on a battlefield. One of the biggest issues was hygiene. Now, by hygiene, I mean things like washing your hands, using clean dressings for wounds, and generally taking care of soldiers in an environment where they won't get an infection. In fact, more Civil War soldiers died of infection than actually died in battle during the Civil War. So Clara Barton, as a nurse, pushed for these practices to exist in field hospitals. And in fact, when she was in charge, men died at a lower rate than when she wasn't. So some of Clara Barton's most important work is going to come after the Civil War. Most importantly, in 1865, she formed the Office of Missing Soldiers. Now, one thing that we don't often think about when discussing war is the soldiers that are killed or missing in action and never make it back home. Clara Barton managed to find over 15,000 soldiers that were lost during the war. So after all of this work, after she spent years on the battlefield, after she spent years searching for these missing soldiers, Clara Barton's health started to fail her. So she took a trip to Europe. And while in Europe, she visited a place called Geneva, Switzerland. Now in Switzerland, the International Red Cross had just formed a couple of years previously. When Clara Barton saw what the International Red Cross was doing, she was determined to bring it to the United States. Now, famously, during the Civil War, Clara Barton would treat both Union and Confederate soldiers, believing that any man or woman who is in trouble is deserving of help. This is a major tenet of the Red Cross to this day. Now, when she returned home, Clara Barton started to petition her neighbors, just like she had done before the Civil War. She petitioned her neighbors and eventually spoke before Congress, forming the American branch of the International Red Cross. After Clara Barton was named president of the Red Cross, she served until 1904, after which she finally retired and eventually passed away.
Hi, I'm Miss Collins, the academic enrichment teacher at Stafford Elementary.
And I'm Mr. Kinney, the district librarian for Stafford Municipal School District. For today's Investigations in Slime, we're covering the first grade science Texas Standard TEK 1.2b, Plan and Conduct Simple Descriptive Investigations. We encourage you at home to follow along and make slime with us. You can do that by getting out your trusty science investigation notebooks. If you don't have one, don't fret. You can use any notebook. Gosh, any old piece of paper will work. Write down the materials list, all of the instructions, and even the outcomes, like, did Miss Collins and I make slime for real? Now, making slime is fun and educational. However, making slime should be done with an adult for safety purposes. You should have an adult assisting you with the materials and instructions so that everyone is safe.
But the materials needed for slime are washable PVA school glue, water, baking soda, contact lens solution, food coloring, measuring spoons, measuring cup, a mixing bowl, a spatula, and reusable plastic bag or food storage containers.
All right, students, so get your pencils and your science notebooks out and ready. We're going to start mixing all of our ingredients to see if they all combine into slime. And cross your fingers. So first, we're going to take a half a cup of water. This is a half a cup measuring spoon. I think I may need a little more water because we want to go up to half a cup. Is that half a cup? What do you think, Miss Collins?
I think that's a half
Is
a
that
cup.
half a cup?
Yes.
All right. On the mixing bowl, you see where it says 1 cup right here? That's where we're trying to get to, is 1 whole cup. And you take a half a cup of glue. So I don't need the half cup measuring spoon. For this, I can just pour glue in until it reaches the 1 cup mark.
Boy, that looks funny, the glue on top of the water.
Yeah. Are you ready, Miss Collins?
I'm ready.
All right. I'm going to stir it a little bit and pour it into her mixing bowl. I wish it was on the table.
Okay.
Yuck. Here, I'm going to use that one. It's already got glue on it. And we're going to mix some food coloring in. Miss
I love yellow.
Miss Collins' favorite color is yellow. So we're going to put a couple of drops.
I
What do you
bet the
think?
color is going to change yellow by adding the yellow food coloring, Mr. Kenny. Yes, it's
Do you think that's
changing.
dark enough?
Yes, I love that yellow.
I'm going to put one more in.
The more yellow, the better.
The
for
more
me.
yellow, the better. So we've got half a cup of water, half a cup of glue, and a few drops of food coloring. And Miss Collins is mixing. We need to
mixing.
add 1/2 teaspoon, that's this little bitty spoon, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda.
That's a small
It's really
measuring
small.
cup.
All right, you ready?
Yes, sir.
Are you sure that's yellow enough?
That's yellow enough.
You don't want more yellow?
No, that's the perfect color. Yellow matches
Okay.
the sun, Mr. Kenny.
All right, this is where the magic starts. Are you ready? We're going to put 2 tablespoons of saline, and then the slime should start working. Are you ready, Miss Collins?
I'm ready. I'm stirring.
All right.
Can't wait. 2. So 1. That's 1. And 2.
All right, it should start coming together. But if it doesn't start coming together, that's okay. It says here that we need to keep mixing until the slime changes texture a bit. Don't worry if it gets runny or stays runny or sticky. Look at it, it's already getting hard.
It
Yeah.
is, Mr. Kenny.
It
I'm
should
happy
get thicker
to.
and thicker as you stir.
This is so awesome, boys
Do you want
and
to put it
girls.
on the table and we can start kneading it?
What does the word need mean, Mr. Kenny? What's
Well,
need?
simply put, it means to like squeeze and massage the stuff with your hand.
That sounds like the fun part. So let me get all this sticky slime
looks
out the bowl. Yes, it does. It's all sticky. Now I get to put my hands into it, Mr. Kenny, and knead, and that means to massage and squeeze with your hands. Here I go. Sticky and sticking to my fingers. Let's
Guys, what do
see if
y'all
I can
think?
get it all.
This looks so messy and gooey and fun. Do you think we made it? Do you think we made?
I wonder if we followed the instructions correctly. We should have slime.
So much fun.
As promised, we're going to show you cool activities that you can use at home with the slime that you just made. Sounds fun?
Sounds fun. What are we going to do first?
First, we're going to use magnetic letters and we're going to spell words into our slime. Let me see, what word do I want to use in my slime? And this is our original slime that we made. So first, think of a word, Mr. Kenny. What word can you think of? Because I'm thinking of my word. My words start with the S. It feels kind of runny and solid at the time. Start with the S and you have that sneaky E at the end.
I think she wants me to guess the word
Can you
slime.
guess the word? Slime. That is the word I'm going to put into my slime, Mr. Kenny. Can you come up with the word?
I'm going to put in the word read.
Read.
But Ms. Collins, I have a question.
Yes.
This is really slimy. Do you think the letters are gonna cut the slime or just be eaten by the slime?
Let's see, Mr. Kenny. I think that the letters will leave an impression into the slime, and we will actually get to see the letters in our
In the slime?
So let's make a good plate so we can use our letters to place into the slime. I have my word slime. So let me spell my word slime. S-L-I-M, and here comes that sneaky E at the end, E, slime.
That's a great word, Miss Collins. My word is read. R-E-A-D. Read.
Very good. And our boys and girls love to read, Mr. Kenny.
Yes, they do. They love reading.
So let's place our letters into our slime to see if the slime with the letters make an impression in our slime. So let's place our first letter into the slime, kind of pressing hard so that hopefully it will make the shape of the letters. How cool would it be to practice spelling sight words in your slime?
In slime? Miss Collins, that's just crazy fun.
Fun and educational, Mr. Kenny. Okay, so
I
here's
kind of like it
my
like
word.
that. That looks so cool. So Spartans, for our next investigation with our slime is to determine if slime will bounce or will it splat. So we're going to take our original slime. Oh, before we take our original slime, get out your science investigation journals and write the question, will it bounce or splat? And you can record all of your outcomes and observations, all right?
Okay.
So we're just going to take it from the same height. I'm going to take it from the same height and see if it will bounce. 1, 2, 3. Was that a bounce?
It was more like a wobble.
It was more like a wobble. It didn't splat though. Let's see if we do it from a higher drop. What do you think about here? Can you get that high?
Let's see.
Ooh!
Mine's wobble.
Mine wobbles. So we have a wobble and not a splat. That's good, I guess. It doesn't bounce though.
Really cool.
We did a lot today.
A lot of learning and a lot of fun today. For more information about slime and making slime, you can go to www.sciencebuddies.org. And don't forget, try this book, How to Make Slime by author Lori Shores.
Spartans, if you do make slime at home, please take a picture and post it on Twitter. Use the hashtag @SMSD Library and the hashtag #SpartansLearn.
Okay, Spartans, until next time, I'm Miss Collins. Stay safe.
I'm Mr. Kenny, and keep learning.
Bye.
We'd like to thank all of our media personnel that made this possible and everyone at home that supports our students. We hope that you've enjoyed this program today. Be sure to follow us on social media and check out our website for more educational updates. Once again, I'm Dr. Robert Bostic, and now you're in the know with some news that you and your family can use.